Your horoscope is a beautiful map of the heavens the moment you took your first breath. And in that map is so much more than whether you're a Leo or a Libra or a Cancer. There are all these different positions that all have something to say about who you are. And we're here to grow in love and consciousness while we're alive.
That's Heidi Rose Robbins, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Hey guys, I'm your host, Kara Duffy, and you are in for a delicious conversation today with our special guest, Heidi Rose Robbins. Heidi is an esoteric astrologer who works with people from all over the world, including having many celebrity clients. She's an author, a multiple TEDx speaker, a coach, and the creator and host of the Radiance Project podcast. She's an example of how to use your light to show others how to access their own innate power and liberation. I can't wait to hear what you guys get from this special episode. Before we jump in, I want to remind you to ask yourself, where are you choosing good enough when you know there's an opportunity to choose extraordinary? I invite you to come to one of my workshops, join my Thrive membership, or even book a free introductory coaching session so that you can start listening to yourself as worthy and deserving of the dream life you imagine. And start having a plan to make it all happen. What could be possible by stepping into your power? Visit thepowerfulladies.com or karaduffy.com to take action today. Well, welcome to the Powerful Ladies podcast.
Thank you, Kara. It's so good to be here.
I am really excited to talk to you today. You have such an interesting job, and how you help people, I think, is so fascinating. So I want to dive right in. But let's begin. Please tell everybody who you are and, what you do for the world.
Love that. Well, I'm an astrologer and I'm a poet. I sometimes like to say I'm a poet with the map of the heavens in my pocket. I also love to work with women, particularly in retreat settings and one-on-one. And I love to combine poetry and astrology as tools for self-discovery.
How did you get into astrology being how you get to help people and spend your day?
I know, isn't it so good? I'm lucky. I was born into it, is the short answer. My father is an astrologer and a teacher. And from the get-go, it was like I was sort of living in a bilingual household. And so he always spoke astrology to me. And I have two brothers who, never grew interested. So I just happened to be the one that had the sort of like, that sounds fascinating. And he would just talk to me about friends and talk to me about world events. And he would always do it through the lens of astrology. And the good thing is he was never pushy. So I got to go to him, and say, hey, Dad, when I was about 18, like, I'd love to learn more,
Mm-hmm. And this is the topic that so many people follow and use and are fascinated by and come back to. And it is not something that is always respected in the scientific community or in culture, in Western culture in general. What do you say to people who are doubters about it or don't understand it? Is it really just a lack of getting it? Is that the space that's missing, or how does it work for you? And what do you know about it that people should?
Well, maybe I would just offer a broad, grand, lovely invitation to get curious. The minute that we close ourselves down and say that's nonsense before we've even listened for a moment to somebody who has actual knowledge, then we've just started to close down our life and life gets far less interesting. So I've had many, many clients who have brought spouses in who were skeptical, and they all start like sitting 7 feet away from me, but slowly they'll come and they'll lean in because people feel seen and understood and heard. And look, it's changing dramatically, Kara, the willingness to look at astrology. I have been doing this now for 25 years, and it is dramatic what's happened in the last 5 years. I think the younger generation is coming in and saying, it's a great tool. Are you kidding me? Let me learn. I mean, I'll take anything and everything that offers its goodness to my own development. So I just say, like, just get curious if you're skeptical and come meet with me and we'll have a chat.
Yeah. Well, and I think most people think of astrology, they think of, the back of a magazine where they get to read their monthly horoscope. It's so much more than that. So for people who that's their reference point, what else can they access working with you and diving into astrology at a deeper level?
Yeah, it's so important to go beyond the kind of don't go outside tomorrow, a rock will fall on your head, or you're going to have a great sexy day or whatever, I mean, astrology is a study of the heavens. It's your horoscope is a beautiful map of the heavens the moment you took your first breath. And in that map is so much more than whether you're a Leo or a Libra or a Cancer. Mm-hmm. There are all these different positions that all have something to say about who you are. And we're here to grow in love and consciousness while we're alive. Yeah. And each of these energies is exquisite and offers us gifts, and we get to dance with that in the realm of astrology. So you're given like a treasure map to the mm-hmm. center of yourself. And you're given a map, also an invitation to give the best of yourself to humanity. Dare I get that grand? Yes. I mean, You're here to figure out your gift, and astrology can help you do that. Mm-hmm. And we can go into details later, but that's the basic.
I've always loved it. I still have a little book I got from my mom when I was like for Easter years and years and years ago. I think I was maybe like 7. That's like a little book about being a Libra. And it's like, what are your personality traits? How do you match with different signs? What to be aware of? And I still have it. And it's always been really interesting to me to see when it shows up and how I've evolved as I age and what parts show up or come back. So I think it's fascinating. I also think anything that can give you insight into who you are for personal development and awareness matters so much. Like, I'm always like, take all the tests, take the Enneagram, take the StrengthsFinder. Like, what does it show you? As a coach, so much of the work I do, and I'm sure you do as well, is about blind spots and, letting people see there's so much more than this like tunnel vision they've been stuck in, either from being exhausted or overwhelmed or just not looking up. Like, it amazes me how many people don't stop, pause, and like look around, because there's so much more that we don't see every day. What's been some of the coolest things that you as a guide for people have experienced through them?
I just have to say it's such a privilege to sit with people. And now I've sat with thousands of people, and there's always a moment when something softens, and it can happen within the first 6 minutes, when people start to say, oh, you see that. Oh, it's not my own little secret about myself. And that can be, the good secret or the bad secret, and I'm not saying I'm psychic at all. I'm saying that I look at these beautiful positions in a horoscope, and I know some things about the makeup of this being before me. And of course I'm sitting with them and I'm feeling into where they may be stuck at this particular moment. I just wrote a whole series of little astrological love letter books. And what I think I was trying to do there is just remind people of how magnificent they are. And it's so funny, Kara, the woman who published these books, Lindsay Smith, she has this story. And just like you, her mother gave her this little cancer book when she was 7 years old. And she burst into tears because she thought her parents were trying to tell her that she had cancer. And she had this huge, breakdown, whatever. But in any case, then now, 30 years later or something, we publish these little books together, and they're just meant to be, look at the magnificence of you. And also, like you said, look at these places where you might get stuck, where we might get into our own little wretchedness that we need to shine some light on to free ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many, clients will come to me and say things like, oh, I'm too controlling, or I'm too micromanaging, or I'm too something. I always have to stop them and be like, hold on, what's wrong with that? There's always a yin and a yang, right? So if we're really good at organizing, it can also mean that we over-organize sometimes, right? Yeah. The last call was someone who's like, I see all the worst case scenarios. And I was like, that's actually a huge tool. That means that you can plan for it and prevent it from happening. And she had never thought about this trait she had, that it could have any light to it. So I love that you're creating these love letters for people, because it's part of my mission is to get people to stop saying, I can't and not me. And to think that I love the honoring of that. Like, you were born perfect and awesome and exciting. And like, let's remind you. And here's a book all about you that you may or may not know. Plus the books look beautiful. So I would highly recommend people get them, because everyone needs beautiful books on their bookshelf, especially if they can be about them.
Just if they look pretty, they've done their work, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting. I love what you just said about the, you know, how we always say too much, to this, to that. And if we just allow ourselves, we take away the two and just allow ourselves to embrace that word. And what's interesting in astrology is that there's always the pairings, right? So if you're a Libra, the opposite sign is Aries. You know, if you're a Taurus, the opposite sign is Scorpio. And so even if you feel too much, guess what? The opposite side of the stick is in your being. And so, you know, even if as a Libra, you might feel too accommodating or too people pleasing, always over here on the other side is Aries. That's like, I am a powerful woman coming forth, or I am a powerful man coming forth and offering my gift. And I don't compromise and I don't over accommodate. So you always have the balancing agent there.
Well, one thing I think is really interesting, I saw an article about it recently, is that, you know, we know that there's been shifts in the universe over time, right? Whether it's, you know, magnetic fields, the tilt of the earth, all of these things. Is astrology being looked at based on when people were born and where things were in a more refined level than how we kind of have them currently set up? Like, for example, I'm a cusp, right? So I'm the 22nd of October. So depending on when I was born, in the, you know, where and when, are there slight shifts to consider based on where the poles were, like more of the, I guess, exact mapping versus just staying kind of in the normal zones of what a astrological sign would be? Does that make sense? Am I being clear?
Well, I'll answer it in two ways. The first is that if you have your exact time of birth, we talk about cuspiness a lot, and I would say your sun is where it is. So if you were born at 29 degrees Libra, 52 minutes, and 5 minutes later you would have been a Scorpio, guess what? You are still a Libra, and you chose to come in as a Libra. Now, you might feel Scorpio because you might have some personal planets in Scorpio that bring in the Scorpio energy, but your sun is where it is at that specific moment and in specific relationship to all the other planets. And I guess I would say, you know, yes, astrology continues to evolve. We continue to discover planets and discover, you know, bodies in the heavens that we didn't know were there. And so we can get more and more refined and specific around the exact minutia and detail of the heavens, which of course allows us to go back and say, oh, you know, we hadn't discovered Chiron until 1976 or 77. And so then we go back in time and we say, what does this mean in terms of our own birth and our own, you know? So I think we need to be incredibly specific about our time of birth. And sometimes people don't really get that. They're like, I was born around 9. Yes, that's good to know. But in terms of using astrology as a brilliant and specific science and art, we need the exact time, do you know? Yeah.
And for everyone listening, to give more clarity of what I was asking before, essentially based on how the planet has changed and our exact pole, like north-south poles and all of that, somebody who was born October 22nd at Cleopatra time versus October 22nd when I was, like there could be a, based on science, there might be a slight difference in what everything would be because of how the earth has moved and other things have shifted in regards to all the positioning. That's what I was referring to.
Yes.
That a Greek Libra, what might be different than a modern, 21st century Libra, slightly. Or where it fits in the cycle.
It's tricky to go back and look way back and try to get an exact chart based on the charting that we're doing now. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
Which I think is cool because it says that it's not stuck, right? As you said earlier, it's evolving the more we know and the more we see. And like poor Pluto got kicked out
But you know
Like,
what? I have to say, I can't stop calling Pluto a planet.
I
I've
can't
just,
either.
maybe
Yeah.
we've demoted it astronomically, but it's such a powerful archetypal energy that, even I just keep on saying that it's a
Yeah.
planet.
Yes. Choosing to go into this line of work, you were pulled to it, your father was in it, you came to him with it. Um, when was a moment when you had confirmation, like, yes, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. Like, this is why I'm here.
It's a good question. Well, it's so interesting because for the first, I would say 30 years of my life, I was very focused on theater and performance. And,
Mhm.
but almost immediately upon finishing graduate school, I said to myself, this was not about acting. This was actually about presence and
Mhm.
community and, um, encouragement and group work and like it, life is funny how it evolves and how it prepares you for things, right? And
Mhm.
so quietly astrology was with me all along, and I loved it for myself, and then I started to do it for my friends, but I was still directing and I was still
Mhm.
performing and I was still doing all this. And then there was a moment when I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and a dear friend of mine, David Trezemer, invited me to come and start working, sort of combining astrology and theater. We called it ceremonial theater. And so I started to blend these worlds. And
Mhm.
right when I started to blend the worlds and started to teach it and started to direct some pieces that blended these worlds, I said, oh my gosh, this is my sweet spot, because
Mhm.
I can use theater to help people grow into their fullest offering, using the chart. And so I still do that, and I offer
Mhm.
retreats, and we embody the energies, and we explore how it feels in the body, because I don't think anything can change until you really know it and feel it in your body, you know
Mhm.
so so I guess it was a moment in Boulder when I was like, late 20s, and I was probably right around my Saturn return, and I said, I think I've struck gold here.
Mhm. Well, and that brings up for me, there's two things that were great. The first is how you took two of your areas of interest and like mashed them together to find like, that is it, right? I
Yeah.
think people get nervous to combine things that seem so different sometimes. And, but that's where there's so much gold for all of us to lean in on. And then I also love that you mentioned like the return of your Saturn, because I know for my life, there are clear cycles. I don't even, I am not charting anything. I'm sure there's so much growth I could have if I did. But like, I know I'm like, ooh, it's been about 7 years. That's why this is like, I can feel the shifts happening again. And I know that right now I'm in a big shift again. Like I'm in one of those level up shifts. I can just feel it and based on what's happening. And I'm one of those people that loses my mind when I'm in like the lull. It is
Mm.
so hard to embrace the like waiting for things to click.
Yeah.
Like it makes me a little crazy. So it's so refreshing to not be in that space right now and to be in a more energized zone. But can you speak to like what some of those cycles are and how they impact us by way of astrology?
Yeah. It's so true, by the way, in terms of like, if somebody's feeling skeptical, one of the best ways to introduce astrology is to go back through the life and sort of point out certain
Mhm.
moments of the life that
Yeah.
might have had a certain texture. And then they're like, well, yeah, actually I did get divorced. Oh, so you start
Yeah.
to look at the cycles that have passed so that you can encourage people about the cycles to come. Right. So for
Mhm.
example, if you are you a Libra, in fact?
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
said you're a Libra?
October
Yeah, yeah.
22nd.
Yeah. So part of the reason that you might be feeling that Libra and, feeling the up leveling is because we're in a cycle right now where Jupiter and Saturn are both in the sign of Aquarius, which is
Mhm.
an air sign, which activates your Libra air sign. So suddenly the air and the communication and the exchange is like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it's all happening. And Aquarius is
Mhm.
such a distributive sign and getting it out there. And a podcast like this is such a Libran endeavor. We're talking, we're having a conversation,
Yes.
but I would just say to you, there are certain cycles. Yes, there's a Saturn return. It happens when we're about
Mhm.
28 29 to 30. And then it happens again when we're like 56 to 60. And this is a time of huge decisions in our life and real maturation and real commitment. And people get married and people get divorced and people start new jobs. It's a very deliberate, clear decision-making time. Whereas if I'll give you another example, Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the chart. So every 12 years, it will hit certain positions in your chart. And you'll have a Jupiter return at like 12 and 24 and 36 and 48. And Jupiter's all about fruition and growth and opportunity. And you meet people and job opportunities come your way. I mean, it's like, it's expansion. So you have to look at the orbits of the planets to look at these cycles. If you live to be 84, you'll have a Uranus return because Uranus takes 84 years to go around the chart. And that's like a total liberating energy, you know? So the cycles are fascinating. And astrology is primarily a science of cycles and relationships.
No, I think it's amazing. So a lot of things are happening right now. You see all these like women moon circles, and there's a lot of moon conversations happening in, you know, I live by the beach, right? So there's like the events at the beach. We just had this, you know, strawberry supermoon. Is the moon thing as big as people are making it? Or is it much more of like, I would imagine it's much more one of many, and it's just becoming a trend thing to talk about right now because people see it more than they see other things.
Yeah, I think it's a way in. And I write moon notes every morning on Instagram because it's a way in for people to understand a rhythm or a cycle. If you had to study cycles waiting every 12 years and learn, you know, it wouldn't work so well. But if you can study every 2 to 2.5 days, the moon changing position, or if you can watch the cycle of the moon, you know, that's a pretty powerful thing. It's funny because in esoteric astrology, which I practice, the moon is actually considered the place where we get stuck in old patterns and where we might feel safe, but we have to outgrow it. So I consider it very much, and I also think because the moon is so deeply connected to the divine feminine and the divine feminine is rising, as it were, I think that's part of the reason that the moon is being so emphasized. But we are definitely going to open to the acknowledgement and celebration of many other planets and positions.
You know, when you think of the words powerful and ladies, what do they mean to you separately? And does the definition change when they're combined into the phrase powerful ladies?
You know, I feel it's so interesting because power is, I get an image of power. You know, power is like assertion, standing in one's own, uprightness, speaking out, and all of those things are beautiful and true. But I think that the deepest power comes from our knowledge of self and offering our gift with the most profound, fierce love. And so power for me is inextricably linked to love. And, but it's love motivated by the desire for change, anger about conditions. You know, you can have love fueled or anger fueled by love, do you know? So, I mean, power for me is never just like the assertion. It's what happens in your being when you are aligned with your work, when you're giving of yourself generously, when you're standing in love. And ladies, I don't know. I mean,
that's how I hear it.
I hear it very playful in a way.
Yeah.
Do you know? And something about ladies, at least in the past, has felt very much like there's something about gathering with that word, you know, coming together somehow. But I hear it as a call, an invocation, you know, come on now, step up. when I hear it together, you know, this is who we are. Let's step up.
You know, what's the greatest transformation that you've seen for clients you've worked with? Like how big of an impact can, you know, diving into your own astrology, how much can it move somebody?
Look, it can move people hugely in the realm of their career, daring steps. It can move people hugely in the realm of daring to love more, to give their gifts. I would say, and a deep inner level, it can be a profound self-acceptance and self-compassion that changes everything. Do you know? So
Yeah.
when we are willing to claim and live into and soften around the being that we are, everything changes. And astrology deeply connects us to the soul purpose and to the soul love. And so, I can speak, I think the inner change occurs, and then every outer change that you could possibly want, I've seen happen,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything, people falling in love after, many, many, many years of searching, people finally getting their first big job after many years of working hard, people finally having their baby, people finally divorcing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
every change can be seen and can be encouraged and can be looked at with an objective lens through astrology.
Yeah. I also love that it allows you to see possibility in what you already have. It makes me crazy when everyone's always trying to work on what they don't have or what they think they're not good at. And I'm like, there's so much you're already good at. Let's just double down there. If you're not good at, if your writing isn't your thing, talk, draw, we don't need to fall into patterns that other people have created for us. And I'm constantly trying to move people back into, where should you go? Where should you go? And to me, the work that you're doing allows people to see that as well. You are perfect just the way you are. So what do you got? What are the tools in your toolkit and how do we use them?
Yeah. And you know what? If people just started to learn their rising sign position, which is so many more people are learning that now, which is the sign that was at the horizon the moment that you took your first breath. And if you only spent the rest of your life steeping in, cultivating, giving the gift of your rising sign with a great sense of humor about how we get, stuck and how we, sabotage ourselves, with a sense of humor about it. If we just kept standing in the light of our rising sign and saying, what a blessing that I get to stand in the stream of this, we would be good to go.
Yeah. You mentioned before that when you hear the word ladies, it's like a call to gathering. How have women in your life contributed to your path and where you are now? And, how have they gotten you through some hard times?
I have been enormously blessed in my life to have incredible women around me from the get-go. And I had a little circle in high school, a little circle in college, a little circle in graduate school, that have just been total inspiration. And for the last 10 years, I've offered these Radiant Life retreats, mostly for women, although now men as well.
Yeah.
But it is the greatest honor to sit in a circle with women and to recognize that in any circle, you could look in the space and you could say, oh, you're here to offer me something. I can feel it. Oh, I have something for you. Oh, you drive me a little crazy, but I am going to work on that, And so, but I mean, this is one of the greatest joys of my life, is the women in my life, because there is something about my experience of working with women is that we are all here lifting one another and reflecting the beauty of one another. And it's so different than the typical, how we've somehow been, named in the past of we're all catty. We all just want to destroy each other, whatever. It's, of course that exists, sadly, but less, I think the more that women are here to teach collaboration, true Aquarian spirit, we really can lift one another.
You have done a great job as your career in this space has expanded of working your value ladder, right? You've added the books, you've added the podcast, you have the retreats, you keep looking for new ways to give this to more people. How has, adding the podcast and adding the books into what you offer, how has that changed how you think about your business, and how has that changed your level of impact?
Well, yeah, there was a moment 3 years ago, I guess, that that I really started a bunch of things. I started about 3.5 years ago. I started the podcast. I started the Moon Notes. I started brewing about the books. I started talking about the books with everyone, I started calling in my allies, calling in help. And I guess I would just say all of these branches have just helped me feel the ripple out into the world. And so now the most unusual 6 degrees of separation occurs, and I can feel, and I get notes, of course, that say, this saved my day, or this made a difference, and so that's such a gift to hear that if you show up in your authenticity, you can help another navigate their hard times, I love this. There's a beautiful idea around service that is offered by this teacher named Joel Kuhl. And he basically just says that our truest service is the spontaneous expression of self. So it's not about like, I'm going to go do this and go do that. Although we need everyone to be on the front line, we need people to be on the front lines actively, but if you are truly being who you are meant to be in the world, that is the greatest service you can offer. And so that's what I just try to do as authentically as I can. And I try to show up when I feel crappy and say, hey, I feel crappy and I look like a mess, but I'm here for you, or I try to show up when I'm in my highest of highs and say, this is possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
The books have been such a joy because I really did. I went away to Ojai one day because I had this image while I was getting a massage. I was like, oh, Rebecca, I just had this amazing image. And I went away to Ojai and I actually made one of the books. They were like, I hand wrote it and made this little book. And I was like, this is what I'm going to make over the next, this is going to happen in the next year and a half. And I put it on my altar, which is really just a pretty little thing by my bed. And I put a little stone on it and I said, this is going to happen. And then I just started to talk about it with joy because it was so meaningful to me to give these love letter gifts. And then I'm at a party and I'm talking with a woman and I don't know she's a publisher and I talk about the books and I'm just, oh, la, 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 la. And then a week later she says, can we do this? So it's like just the power of the magic meeting the intention.
Well, and, two things that I hear in that leading up to that is you listening to your intuition, taking action on it, declaring it was going to happen, not knowing how, didn't matter how. We know it's going to happen. And then you told everyone about it, right? Just authentically. And to me, the biggest, if people did one thing, it's just tell people what excites you and what you want to create. Just say it. Because I am always amazed at how who you need to take the next step shows up if you're telling people about it.
People want to help. And I would say everything good has come in my life has come because I invest in relationship and I deeply care about people and wanting to help them take their next step. And so every amazing opportunity has come through a person saying, hey, you've got to go experience her, or, hey, let me help you with that, So
I always like to talk to guests about 8-year-old self. So when you were 8, would 8-year-old you have imagined the work you're doing now? And if not, what did 8-year-old you want to create in the world?
I think 8-year-old me was very interested in any kind of performing, any kind of, I think my dad tells me that I would go into the kitchen and do a dance. And then I would say, clap, clap. I mean, I definitely liked to have I also liked to cheer people. I liked to bring light to people. I liked to, make people feel better, which has its, tricky part too, as we get older, right? We have to learn how to not always play that role. But I think my 8-year-old self knew something about wanting to share without apology and wanting to share without hesitation and wanting to share my heart. I think my 8-year-old self knew something about my heart and she still does. And, I would never have imagined myself as an astrologer, but I certainly would have imagined, I think, the poet self or the teacher self in some way.
I know as coach, like I can't turn coach off. So I have to be really mindful to not coach my family, my friends. I have to be really aware of like, hold on, I know what you're thinking. Ask first. Now is not the time. Do you have to catch yourself not providing the guidance and advice that you see to the loved ones in your life?
I love the language of astrology, and I probably have not made it through a day since I started astrology without speaking the language in some way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but honestly, like this is kind of funny, but I'm so exhausted with at this point, like I'm so full with astrology right now that
Yeah.
now when I go inside and have dinner, it's just like don't talk to me about astrology, don't and so I can't. I think that if I were answering you truthfully, I would say anytime a friend is having a conversation with me and I will always be like, well, that is fascinating, but I don't feel the need to
Mm-hmm.
solve anything. I just like to go,
Yeah.
remember, it's your Saturn return or whatever it is, So I might just drop a little piece in there, but I don't want to sit down and give them a session.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you do to protect yourself and rejuvenate yourself and give yourself the recharge that you need to keep giving in such a full way to everyone?
This is the piece, my friend, that I am that I am learning still and
Mm-hmm.
am not have not mastered. And I just was reading a book about burnout. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Even reading the book made me feel softer and quieter. But I will just say this, what I do, and I'm still not perfect at it, is I do need solitude. And I do for the last 10 years, I would say twice a year, I take myself away for several nights and I just write and I walk and I drink tea and I just completely unplug. And I know in my being that I need
Mm-hmm.
solitude and silence and no talking for big chunks of time. And I just recently did a week because I was working on a book where I was just
Mm-hmm.
by myself, and I could have done 4 weeks. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's really the only thing that I have figured out, except for making sure that like there's beauty around, like if I have,
Mm-hmm.
tulips in my life or, that does that. To have beauty around me really is replenishing for me.
Mm-hmm. What sign are you? May we ask?
Yes, I'm an Aries. So you and I are opposite. I'm an Aries with Leo rising and a Capricorn moon.
Love it.
Yeah.
So as you are continuing to expand your business and your acts of service, what's next for you? And what are you excited about now that we're getting a little bit back to the new normal?
Yeah. Well, there are many things boiling and bubbling, one could say. I will be going back to the Radiant Life retreats. We've taken, a year and a half off. So there'll be one in March of 2022. I am working on another book right now that will come out in the fall of 2022 as well. That's going to be a kind of 365 days of astrological encouragement.
Awesome.
And honestly, I am working to create more spaciousness because I do sense that I've been so on output for a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of years now. Something else wants to enter. I know it, but there's no space. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to create actually a schedule where I'm working with clients only this many days of the month,
Yeah.
and then the other days are going to be unscheduled, dare I say, and to see what enters,
Yeah.
because I do think there's something more poetic, more
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that wants to come through. And I really
Yeah.
don't know, and that's a beautiful thing to not know, because it's exciting. So I'm both moving things forward and wanting to say yes, and also being really rigorous and careful
Mm-hmm.
about what the fall looks like.
Yes. The workshop for July that I'm doing is all about boundaries.
Very
And
good.
so you and I might be getting similar signs of, of creating space, and how do the only way I know of to get all the things and make room for what I don't know is the boundaries piece. I'm a huge proponent of schedule blocking and putting it all on the calendar. You know, my calendar is a love language. If you're on my calendar, it means I love you. It's going to happen. And, you know, I love that you talked about, you feel this poking of like, hey, can we hang out? Hey, I want to come. And we don't know who's knocking on the door, but we're like, okay, well, can you wait until Thursday? Because I don't have any time until then, right? And I also love what Elizabeth Gilbert says in Big Magic of exactly what you were talking about, of how do we leave room for what we don't know is coming or what's next, or just the opportunity to let our mind go. I love the idea of taking a couple of days and hiding with myself somewhere.
Yes, yeah.
And I think more people should do that. I also think there's power in the retreats that you put together of getting to, you still get that escape, but you're getting an escape with other energies and other intentions. And again, space to go places that you don't normally allow yourself to go. We get so overwhelmed and so rigid that, you know, being the balanced Libra that I am, it's like, cool, how can we have structure and not structure at the same time?
Yes. Yes.
Because I work with my business coach, but probably I should be working with somebody like you about the pendulum swings that I get as a Libra of, all right, let's organize everything. Oh, nope, I hate organization. Let's come back over here, right? So I know I'm always striving for getting the true balance where I want it. And it's a tricky thing because of how we go through those different cycles, I think. And if I'm in a lull, I will try to control more than if I'm in not the lull phase.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautifully said about Libra. And sometimes with Libra, it's like Libra, because it's weighing things so much, you know, and it has a hard time. It goes one direction and then the other. And it also is like, I don't know what to do next. And so with Libra, it's always about what is the next tiny right choice for this moment, you know, so that I stay on that narrow path between these two wildly, swinging opposites. And it's, and of course, balance is never achieved, right? I mean, for a taste, for a moment, we're like, oh, that feels so good. And then the phone call or the knock on the door, whatever it is. So Libras are always striving for balance, but it's never really achieved. And so if you let yourself off the hook with that, you're like, that helps too.
Yes, I think I like the tighter swing versus the extreme, right? So if I can stay in the tight one, we're all right. When it gets a little crazy, I'm like, whew. It makes me wonder now how often, and this is something I would love to grow into and figure out, how often am I coaching as Libra to other signs versus coaching whomever's showing up, right? Because in my mind, a lot of how I help people is the boundaries and the setup and the structures and, you know, what should you be doing? What do you love? And pulling people a little bit closer to creating systems for themselves. Because that's usually why I work with a lot of creative entrepreneurs, because I can provide systems and structures, and you say spreadsheet and they cry. So I think it's really, I'm going to start looking at that to see what's showing up as where am I being a Libra versus where am I really listening intently for them. So,
well, but also there might be drawn to you precisely because you're the Libra that has that, you know, and it's always interesting to, you know, to watch who comes to us and to see if that evolves or changes or who's coming now. And is it about, because as we give our own counsel to the wonderful humans that come and work with us, of course, it's an interesting little look at the self as well. What are we saying? Do you know, what is our current monologue or our current fixation, right? Yeah. Teaching what we need to learn, all of that. Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of core choices, right? That people are always asking themselves, the unanswerable questions. For a lot of people, it's about being accepted and about being loved. As a Libra, it's always, did I make the right choice? Not for all things, but big things. You know, but all of it comes back to, I think, love at the end of the day. When you look at the broad variety of people, especially between 12 signs and then the infinite, it seems to me, combinations of all that you are, are there core truths that you think everyone can go back to, no matter what sign they are or where they're at right now?
That's a big question, Kara.
Sorry, that's maybe one I should have let you prep for.
No. I mean, I would just say there are core principles that I live by that that set me right, and a lot of them were planted by a beloved teacher of mine, Sophia Diaz, and it's so wonderful when we're gifted a teacher early in life that then gets to we get to evolve with that person, and we get to say thank you for passing the wisdom on, And one of the things that she would always say is, there is no preservation of love. There is only liberation of love. And for me, that's so much about, sometimes we're afraid. And so we're cautious. And so we say, well, I have this much love, I'm going to hold on to it. Or I have this much love, I'm not going to dare to risk this much love, And so every sign has an opportunity to liberate love. And if we can ask ourselves how we can liberate love in our lives, that's a beautiful question to ask. And if we can also ask ourselves, how can we realize more beauty in our lives? And realize is a good word, because it's really about discovering. I might be looking at a big plot of dirt, but how can I realize the beauty there and see the light that underlies all things? So I think for me, it's always returning back to the principles of love and beauty in each of the signs. And also, there's a true power, love, and intelligence in each of us. How is it manifested with the beauty and dance of these signs? And if we ask ourselves the beautiful questions of power, of beauty, and of intelligence and love, we're in good shape.
No, I completely love that. And, you said at the beginning of this podcast, if you could dare to project things as grand. And I think you can, because, if we start with ourselves and then it goes into our household and it goes into the community, there's so much energy right now that is being spent in the wrong places. And when people ask me, like, how can we change the world? I'm like, it's there, right? Like, how can we shift our energy? How can we shift our intentions? And you don't need to start with the cure for cancer as like step one.
Right.
It's getting to know you so you can be honest with yourself, so that you can get to that liberation you're talking about, that freedom, there's, if I could wave a magic wand, it'd be like, all right, we're going to sprinkle Heidi dust on everybody so we can just like get the show going.
Yeah.
I think that's what breaks my heart about, where the world is right now. And I'm so excited that there seems to be this shift into purpose and alignment and going deeper, whether that's people doing that with having a coach, if it's going through astrology, if it's going through, therapy, like whatever avenue is going to let you go deeper. I'm like, please just start now. We'll probably go through all of them at some point. Yeah. But I think the past year and a half is landing with people that the cycle we've been in individually and collectively, like, isn't working. So what do we where can we start?
That's beautifully said. I actually also loved that image of the sort of outreach, because I always think that more and more that we grow. Previously, we may have grown linearly. Previously, we may have said, well, now that's my next goal, and that's my next goal, and that's my next goal. But I think there's something about the divine feminine growing spherically. So we start out and we say, I'm going to build the lighted house of my body. I'm going to build the lighted house of my home. I'm going to build the lighted house of my community. And your outreach grows wider and wider and wider, and until it becomes the family, becomes humanity. And so I think there's something that we have to get out of this mode of like, it's an uphill climb and I'm by myself. It's like, we're doing this together. There's some old story about how like there's a doorway that you have to get through to get to the other side, to cross the threshold, to have an initiation of consciousness, to grow. You cannot fit through it by yourself. You can only fit through it holding hands.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that beautiful? So
That
it's like,
is.
yeah, it changes when you are, it's too, Hafiz also has a beautiful poem about like, it's too dangerous to not hold hands. We have to
Mhm.
climb together. And I am all about that.
Well, I've been using the Peloton app recently, and I use their their running workouts, which I never thought. I used to run. I stopped being a runner. I'm like, no, I'm still a runner. We're getting it back. And I've been using their runs. So I coached myself back into running. And Robin, who's their kind of head instructor, in one of the workouts says, like, she tells you in that as we're finishing the run, like, put your hands out. We're all holding hands. We're not next to you, but we're all holding hands. Like, we just did all this together. And as I'm like finishing the cool down, I'm always putting my hands out and pretending I'm holding hands, because there's such a refreshing reminder about the fact that, we can feel alone a lot. And I think entrepreneurs may feel it every day more than others, because often we're like in this box of an office that we made, talking to screens where there's no one there half the time,
Yeah.
or writing by ourselves. Like, there's so much output that we're doing that may or may not be cycling back to us, which is why I love, the podcasting piece, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you, knowing that I'm a Libra. But there's something so refreshing about remembering that not only are there people out there who, if we can't see them or feel them, like, they're still there to hold hands with us, but literally knowing that we need people to make it through the door that way, it makes me feel warm inside and good, and gives me goosebumps to be reminded that that's the only way that we can go forward in the powerful way we want. And what you were saying about the cycles and where people are going and not being linear. I listened to a podcast recently where they were talking about how to leave Earth's orbit. A rocket has to make a funnel shape. It doesn't look like it from our perspective, but it is. And I use that all the time because I have a background in product creation, and the product creation cycle is not a straight line. Like, it really is a spiral. And I really think that applies to human development as well, right? Like, clients will get frustrated. Why am I still having a money conversation? I thought we got through this. I'm like, yeah, you did, when the money conversation was, how do I make 10K this month? But now we're talking about, breaking through past 100K this month. Like, we still need to, I see a repeat of conversations with people that keep showing up as they grow, even if the conversation gets a little smaller or different, but I know it's going to circle back around. That's what I see with people. So it makes so much sense to me to see the orbiting that humans have through their life, aligning with the work you do and aligning with these repeat conversations and triggers. And it just keeps evolving with you. You can't, if integrity and perfection is impossible, like, eliminating our triggers to be dust and gone may also be impossible. But I don't think it's a bad thing for it to be that way.
I love that. Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah.
It's so, we ask everybody on the podcast where they put themselves in the powerful lady scale. If 0 is average everyday human and 10 is the most powerful lady possible, where do you put yourself on average? And, where do you put yourself today?
I love that. That's so, I mean, I have the flash upon this acting exercise where you're asked in a group to put yourself according to status. So like how do you consider yourself, like the lowest status versus the highest status? Or sometimes you hold a card to your head with a number, and you have to, by how people are treating you, you have to get in line. Like, if they're bowing to you, you're like, oh, I'm a queen, or whatever it is. But
I love that exercise.
It's so interesting. And it's so triggering because I tell you what, I promise you, every time I played that exercise, if I didn't have a card on my head and I was just organizing myself, you better believe I was sadly heading towards like, sort of middle, sort of low, sort of middle slow, I mean, it's an incredibly triggering question, right? Because it asks us to stand in stand in our power without apology and stand in our power without thinking that it's bragging or, So I would say I'm at this moment in my life that where a lot is culminating and where I've worked really hard and where I can objectively look at my life and say, I've created something that I'm really proud of and I'm helping people, so I'm somewhere feeling between 5 and 10, and I'm feeling, but at the same time, there are absolutely moments where I'm standing and looking at what's been created and looking the beauty around me and then feeling like traveling to 2 in an instant, traveling so I just think it's a complete fluidity. Women are fluid. Wake up one day, we're 10, baby. And then to the next day, we're like 2.5 at the top, So for me, it's just, such a continuum.
Yes. I look forward to maybe when we hit 500 episodes, giving this to some psychology department and they can evaluate everyone's responses because it's so different, right? And to be asking women who are accomplished and successful and, they had some criteria to show that they were powerful to get here, right? And it's amazing to me, the variety of answers and logic behind it. Like it's such a insight into, and I bet if I gave all of the episodes to you, you could probably guess like who's where because you're like, oh, I know that.
Well, again, I also think it's a scale like that is almost a masculine scale, like, because again, like what are we together? What are you and I together? What's this conversation together? What are we at? Oh, we're good. We're at an 8 together, or whatever it is, So there's something that is so inclusive about the divine feminine energy that I think I have a hard time leaving that behind as well. But
well, it's similar as well to the linear versus the map thinkers, right? Like I'm a linear thinker.
Yeah.
Like, so when people ask for a mind map, I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's do that as a first brainstorm. But like, we can't live in a mind map. Like there's no, like it almost gives me a panic attack. Right. And I think that the fluidity and the scale and the perspective matter so much. Like, what's a 10? I don't know. Like, what's $10,000? What's $1 million? I don't know. It's where you're looking from.
You must have strong Virgo and strong Sagittarius. That's I'm thinking I want to look at your chart at some point. Yeah. Because Virgo is so loves the numbers and the minutia and the like getting it organized. And then the Sagittarius is the coach and the runner and the encourager and the uplifter and the visionary. And the Sagittarius says, this is where we're going. And the Virgo's like, and here is how we will exactly get there. Yeah. And the Libra says, and we'll do it with a lot of grace and beauty and joy, so I'm curious.
I love it. No, I would love to do some individual work with you because I'm just curious, right? Learning's my favorite thing. So I think it's really fascinating. And that reminded me of, I've lost it. It's okay. It'll come back. So for everyone who is fascinated about the work you do and what you're up to and how you could transform them, what's next? Where can they follow you? How do they connect with you? What's available to them to get involved and have some Heidi sprinkle dust on them?
Oh, that's amazing. Well, every day I write on Instagram at Heidi Rose Robbins. Every day I post a moon note for the last 3.5 years, and that's a good place to start. Also, my website is HeidiRose.com, and that takes you many places. But one of the cool places you can start is getting a little snapshot of your sun, moon, and rising sign. And I have a little team of astrologers that I've trained that create an audio for you of your sun, moon, and rising. And it's beautiful and it's totally insightful. And you get a much better sense of just, are you just a Libra or what else is going on, So that's another really cool and affordable place to start. And I do retreats and listen to my podcast, the Radiance Project. I'm always talking to fascinating people and we're always exploring their astrology, which is so much fun, because you're like, you learn about what they do. Oh, she's a coach and she does this. And then we look at the astrology to see how it's reflected.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, it has been so stimulating and fun to have this conversation today. Thank you for being a yes to the Powerful Ladies. Thank you for being a yes to me. And I'm sure we will have you on again because this will just generate 100 more questions that I'm sure the community and I have. But it really has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Total joy. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. All the links to connect with Heidi are in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com/podcast. There you can also leave comments and ask questions about this episode. That's the place to tell me your favorite part and what you got. Want more Powerful Ladies? Come join us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies. There you can also find some free downloads to start being powerful today. Subscribe to this podcast and help us connect with more listeners like you by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. If you're looking to connect directly with me, please visit karaduffy.com. I would like to thank our producer, composer, and audio engineer, Jordan Duffy. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. You can follow her on Instagram at Jordan K. Duffy. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.